thumbs up in the back with the video. We're good. All right, welcome. Today is Monday, November 4th. It is 11 a.m. You're at the City Council chambers for a meeting of the Wausau Waterworks Commission. We've got a couple of public comment requests. We're going to approve the meeting minutes first, and then we'll take those second before we get into directors. So I'd entertain a motion to approve meeting minutes from last. Motion from Watson, second from Force. Comments. Go ahead, Mr. Force.
Just looking back at the minutes, at things I raised, one of them was making the EquaFlow website more prominent on the city's website. I have not checked. Has anyone done anything about that?
EquaFlow is updating their site right now, Jim, and we'll be updating ours here within the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. There'll be also some additional public outreach and information coming out within the next week or two at the same time.
Okay, well, my concern was on the city website, finding the EquaFlow website was not easy.
Right.
I assume if it's not easy for me, it's going to be even more difficult for someone not familiar with the waterworks operation. So I had that question. Thank you for answering that. I also want to talk about the operating budget, and I noticed we have a big budget packet again today. I asked to see a summary that showed the budget compared against the operating budget for a prior year, and also a budget versus actual. I don't know if what we have is that version, or if we don't have that yet, or if we're planning to work on that. I don't know the status of that question. Those are my only comments.
I think when we go over the budget today, Jim, I think Mary Ann's here and she can help answer that at that time.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. G? Nope. Anything further? All right, seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. All right, signed up for public comment today. First up is Stacy Marash.
Stacy Morash, 2102 Eagle Valley Lane, Wausau. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about my concerns regarding fluoridation in the drinking water. Last week I shared an EPA webinar with a few of the members of this water commission, and I apologize for not sharing it with all of you, but the webpage on the city site wasn't updated, so I didn't have your contact information. I apologize. I did attend that webinar, which was presented by the Children's Health Protection Advisory Committee, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, which is a division of translational toxicology. Dr. Kyla Taylor, an NIHS epidemiologist, and Dr. Andrew Rooney, who works with NIHS Toxicology and Risk Assessment, gave the presentation on the most recent National Toxicology Program's monograph. To summarize as quickly as possible, this report identified 19 studies they deemed as high quality, 18 of which found some adverse effect from fluoride on children's IQ, and 53 lower quality studies reviewed found 46 that suggest some negative effect from fluoride on children's IQ. In conclusion, they found a moderate confidence that higher fluoride exposure is associated with lower IQ in children, as well as low confidence that fluoride exposure is associated with other neurodevelopmental and cognitive effects in children. 15 studies were assessed for this confidence rating. 8 of 9 high-quality studies found associations in learning and memory impairment, neurobehavioral effects in infants, and learning disabilities such as ADHD. When speaking about the public health importance, they explain that fetal and developing brains are especially vulnerable to fluoride. The benefits of fluoride are from topical contact with teeth, and there is no evidence to support benefit from gestational exposure. In addition, formula-fed infants residing in fluoridated communities are at a higher risk of fluoride toxicity. They have 3 to 4 times greater exposure to fluoride than adults on a per body weight basis, and a 70-fold higher fluoride intake than exclusively breastfed infants, and they also retain more fluoride compared to breastfed infants. After their presentation during the question and answer phase, a participant asked Dr. Taylor what her recommendation would be to a pregnant friend. Dr. Taylor responded by saying she would recommend purchasing unfluoridated water during her pregnancy. So I asked this water commission, How are you going to ensure the pregnant mothers in the city of Wausau do not cause harm to their unborn babies by drinking the water to which you purposefully add fluorosilicic acid? This NTP monograph played a central role in the federal trial on fluoride. On September 24, 2024, a federal district judge found that the 0.7 milligrams per liter dose of fluoride in drinking water, the level considered optimal based solely to avoid discoloration of teeth in children in the United States, poses an unreasonable risk of IQ loss in children, which under the toxics law requires a regulatory response. Keep in mind that during this trial, many experts gave sworn testimony. One of those being Paul Price, PhD, who works for the EPA as a drinking water analyst, who is actually responsible for writing the EPA standard, the very safety standard that dictates there is no harm from fluoride until crippling skeletal fluorosis is developed. Casey Hanen, Director of Oral Health at the CDC, agreed with the toxicological literature during his testimony that explains how fluoride increases the production of free radicals in the brain through several different biological pathways. These changes have a bearing on the possibility that fluorides act to increase the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. And once Dr. Joyce Donahue, PhD, senior scientist for the EPA's Office on Water, was shown the recent high-quality studies I previously mentioned, she also agreed that they warranted a reassessment of all the safety standards we now have on fluoride. There are many more, but unfortunately, I'm limited on time. Currently, we are subjected to municipal water treated with fluorosilicic acid at a level of 0.7 milligrams per liter. This is added to the water to prevent dental caries. This is a medical treatment the taxpayers of the city are subjected to without informed consent. How will you protect those in our community suffering from kidney disease and declining kidney function as they are not able to adequately remove excess fluoride from their bodies? Fluoride accumulates in the body over time. How will you protect the elderly from overexposure to fluoride, which can cause brittle bones and has been linked to increases in hip fractures? The Cochrane Review just published a systemic review of the literature on water fluoridation and dental caries. This review found that adding fluorosilicic acid to municipal drinking water provides very limited benefits, especially compared to that of 50 years ago. Rather than the 25% reduction in tooth decay in children and adults, often cited by fluoride promoters, the review found that it only reduces the decay by 1/4 of one baby tooth at best. So clearly the risks outweigh the benefits, and unless you devise a plan to adequately inform the public about the risks they are taking to their health and the risk to the unborn by drinking this fluoridated water, I ask you to remove it. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Matthew Balgord. And just a reminder, we didn't run the clock. Please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
Sure. Hello. Thank you for coming. I'd like to sincerely thank you all for your service to the city of Wausau. I'm not as good as Stacy. I'm probably not as smart either, but I got a short little thing I wanted to talk about here. I'm not going to talk about all the medical stuff. That's all been litigated for 7 years with experts. So I got this big packet last month here from the health department, but it's all just been gone through with experts. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about some logic and reasoning. You know, we send our kids through school and they go through history class. One of the reasons we listen to history is so we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. We've had a lot of toxic chemicals in the past. We've had asbestos, tobacco, DDT, glyphosate, mercury, lead, J&J talcum powder. There's lots of them. There's been personal injury attorneys lined up around the block, and they're still doing it. I still get solicitations for asbestos, things like that. We don't want to go through all that again. You know, I said hi to Joe earlier. He asked me how old I was. The first thing he said, told him I was 60. I said, from the old days with you, Joe. I guess that gives me the badge to say I'm old enough to remember when. Well, I'm old enough to remember when Joe Jean was down there. You had Joe Pribanich, Dave Cook, Gordy Popko, Dave Tank, Mike Morrissey. you might not always agreed with all those people, but they seemed to run a pretty tight ship. There was a lot less vitriol and a lot less politics and everything. But now there seems to be a difference. There's a lot of politics in this fluoride thing, and I don't think, whether you're liberal or conservative, nobody wants to be poisoned. Nobody wants this stuff in their water if that's what it's been identified as. You go to the dentist, and well, first of all, the dentist will tell you, what about the economically disadvantaged children that don't have access to fluoride? Well, economically disadvantaged children, that kind of pulls at your heartstrings a little bit. And that's what it's intended to do, and you see that all over all the time. But they also have brains, they have kidneys, they have livers, they have thyroids. You can fix a tooth, but what are we creating? We've got are we creating some damaged brains through this? Do we know? There's going to be a dentist comes up here probably, or somebody talking, and they'll tell you, it's safe. We've seen so many less cavities throughout the years, but do they have any studies? Do they have anything they can show you on the safety of the brain and the kidneys, the thyroid, everything else? These are some serious issues here. I know when I go to the dentist's office, they give me a little tube of toothpaste. This is for my kids. They give you a goodie bag with a little tube of toothpaste and a brush and some dental floss. Sometimes a toy is in there. Well, on the back, and you can look at home on all your toothpastes, there's a warning on there. It says, do not let anybody under 12 get their hands on this. Do not swallow this. There's a reason for that. But they'll go and they'll tell you, drink that water, drink that fluoridated water, it reduces toothpaste. Over at my dentist's office, I noticed there's a cooler there. It's got refreshments. It's got Coke, Pepsi, I think it was Coke, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, and sugared water, sugared juice. And I asked the hygienist, they said, we all hear this, brush, floss, limit your sweet intake. I said to her, does sugary drinks cause a lot of cavities? Because my boy had a cavity that day. I said, could it be caused from sugary drinks like sodas? Absolutely, she said. I said, well, how come your cooler there is giving out free sodas and drinks and everything? She said, she just shook her head. She said, I know.
1 minute.
So I just don't understand it. It's kind of almost like, a glass company coming through your neighborhood at night and filling out a brochure, say, we fix windows, and then tying it to a brick and throwing it through the window. It's like, here's your brick, here's your Coca-Cola, here's your fluoridated water, and then you come in. I really think that some of this fluoride is damaging the tooth. It's not even helping it. I don't think it belongs in the stomach. It could be topical, but I don't think it belongs down in the stomach. I think it's damaging our pipes too. Eric was over at one of my houses just about 3 weeks ago. I had lead pipes there. They're pulling the lead pipes out. The pipe broke on the city side of the house in the front yard. Eric saw it. He took pictures of it. It was flushing water into the basement. What ate that lead pipe? Is it the accumulation of this caustic chemical that is known to go through glass, steel, concrete, lead? Maybe not at the moment we put it in.
We're going to ask you to try to wrap it up.
All right. Well, I just had one other thing. I wanted to, I'm talking about logic and reasoning, so I just wanted to say one quote from Thomas Jefferson. Man, once surrendering his reason, has no remaining guard against absurdities. The most monstrous, absurdities the most monstrous, and like a ship without rudder, is the sport of every wind. With such persons, gullibility, which they call faith, takes the helm from the hand of reason, and the mind becomes a wreck. Use reasoning. Some people's reasoning is different than others, but use reasoning. It's on the toothpaste. You're getting sugary drinks at your dentist. Why is that? So I really thank you for your time. Sorry.
Thank you. Jeremy Hoffman.
You can probably tell from my tie where I'm coming from on this, but good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address this commission. I'm Dr. Jeremy Hoffman. I'm a dentist practicing at Dental Visions in Weston. I am also past president of the Central Wisconsin Dental Society, of which Marathon County is a part, and I currently sit on the Board of Trustees of the Wisconsin Dental Association. I'm here today to ask you to help keep patients out of my office. And my office does not have sugary drinks or sugary water in a cooler anywhere. So, it's obviously, it's come to my attention that community water fluoridation is under threat here in Wausau, and I'm asking you to continue it. Fluoride protects teeth from cavities. When fluoride is incorporated into the enamel, that enamel becomes more resistant to cavities forming. This is especially what happens is in young children as their teeth are developing in their jaws. That is why water fluoridation has a systemic effect, and it's most beneficial to children of ages of 10 as that's when the teeth are forming. And even adults, you still get that topical benefit from fluoridated water. Obviously, you'll no doubt hear from people questioning why they should be forced to have their water fluoridated, citing issues of autonomy. And well, yes, autonomy is a valid concern. As a dentist, I have another ethical principle that I need to be thinking of, and that is beneficence, also meaning do good. When I think of public health, which is what water fluoridation is part of, I think of public health as doing the most good for the most people with the least amount of money, because their budgets tend to be the least amount, the lowest. And fluoridated water fits this to a T. It benefits everyone in the community regardless of what their income, their age, their race, or their education, or even their access to dental care. The ADA has statistics that the lifetime cost of one person drinking fluoridated water throughout their lifetime is less than the cost of one filling. Many of us in this room are privileged to be able to afford water filters or purification units to remove the fluoride from our water if we so choose. Some are not so willing, and some have to make that choice in their budget between food, clothing, or other necessities, and fluoridated toothpaste might not hit that budget sometimes. And basically by removing that fluoridated water, you're removing that choice from those people. Dr. Hoffman, I've just heard that there's this study linking fluoridated water to lower IQ scores, and that's true. There was a report that was released from the National Toxicology Program that reviewed 18 studies looking at fluoride levels in the water and children's IQ scores. You have to keep in mind, 15 out of 18 of those studies are not from North America. They're from China and India, where their water levels with fluoride are much higher than what they are here, what they've ever been. So is it really an apples to apple comparison? 2 of those studies were from Mexico with similar flaws, and the 18th study was from Canada and has some challenges to its methodology. They won't share their data with outside researchers to verify what they're finding. This is not the time and place. This is a water commission meeting. It's not the best place for us to really dig into the deep dives of the intricacies of a 150-page document. I don't think that anybody in this room really wants to do that. I just have to point out on the first page of that paper, the first page of text after the cover page and the title page, in bold print, is this text, quote, "This monograph and addendum do not address whether the sole exposure to fluoride added to drinking water in some countries, i.e. fluoridation at 0.7 milligrams per liter in the US and Canada, is associated with a measurable effect on IQ," end quote. There's been talk about toxins and toxicities. I must remind you, guys, it's the dose that makes the poison. You take too much aspirin, and that's going to make you bleed out. There's a drug called warfarin. That's a blood thinner that helps people protect from blood clots so they reduce their risk of heart attack.
One minute, please, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. You take too much warfarin, you have rat poison. So again, it's the dose that makes the poison. Look, I know that fluoridated water, it's not the panacea. It's not, we do fluoridated water and there's no cavities. But every little bit helps. It's a part of the toolbox. It helps our most vulnerable population. So I just strongly ask you to continue community water fluoridation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Public comment? I think that's the first public comment we've had since I've been here, so we're kind of making up for it one day here. Great. Up next is the director's report. We've got some new information in there on the lead and copper rule improvements that we're going to have to start dealing with here in the next 2-3 years. So Eric, if you want to dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So I just put a EPA fact sheet in there. It was a brief overview of some of the major significant type changes that we're going to see. It's going to impact our resources. It's going to impact money, budgets that we're doing as well. Keep in mind that these LCR rules, they were finalized, and they will actually become enforceable in 3 years. So I guess, did anyone have any questions on any specifics on those? We had talked about those prior, but now they are finalized.
Mr. Robinson.
Eric, in light of the past discussions that we've had at the commission, how, will we be able to meet those with our current plan? I know that we're subject to available resources, but do you see a problem with attaining the compliance with the new lead and copper rules?
I don't. I mean, we're definitely going to have to reprioritize some work. We do have quite a bit of additional testing right now. We just have to test for first liter, and we typically allow residents to do that for us. We train them how to do it, and then annually they go ahead and do it, and we pick up the samples. But with this, we're going to have to do first and fifth liter sampling, and so I don't think it's as intuitive to get that fifth liter sample, so we're actually going to have staff go in and do that. And we're basically doubling the number of tests, is it going to go to 2 years or twice a year, Scott? I think
It is,
It's
so
gonna
we'll
go-
be quadrupling, actually.
Yeah. So that'll be significant set of resources on an annual basis. Obviously, we're already in the, just begun the lead service line replacement plan. So we finished our first year this year. We have a few left that we're doing. We're going to end up with about 600 replacements this year. The goal was 553. Just this morning, for 2025, we got the funding list. We had a total request of about $14.9 million. 8.8 is principal forgiveness. 6.1 is loan. The principal forgiveness will be 100% to cover the private side replacements. So that's good news. The 6.1 will be to cover, the loan portion will be to cover the public side.
Mr. Jean.
We exceeded the goal of replacement this year.
We did,
What will be the number next year? Is it 1,500 or something like that?
just about 1,900
Oh,
is what
very
we're
good.
proposing. Yep.
Mr. Forrest.
So the question I have to ask, and my constituents would ask me as well. So we did 600 this year. According to this rule, new rule, we have 10 years to finish. So how many do we have left? And what's the likelihood that we'll complete the job within the 10-year limit and stay within the law?
Well, I think that we can, replace within 10 years. It's actually, I guess it would be just about 13 years, because it doesn't come enforceable, right? So right now, the proposed schedule that we're on is 5 years. I do think that there are some residents out there that, are not going to voluntarily, I think it's a small number, but will not voluntarily replace their line. So then we get back to the ordinance. That's a potential as well. So far, we've had a couple people, not allow us in their home and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think we'll see some more of that, but I think that's a pretty small number. And I would, to get back to your question about how many we have left, I would say we're somewhere around 7,000, 7,300 left estimated.
But you're confident that we can make this 10 or 13-year limit?
I am. Economically, there's going to be an impact,
Yes.
obviously. And so on a year-to-year basis, we're going to have to determine what that economic impact is. And, where that funding is coming from. Is it going to be utility rates? Is it going to be through city funding, general obligation? So,
Thank you.
And the ordinance that was referenced did pass from this body to council, which took it up at a committee of the whole and has since tabled it.
correct. I will just make one more statement. We talk about resources, right? And the commission and the city council did include adding staff to the water utility, which will be beneficial for us. These are just some of the regulations that are coming down. I've been working in the water and sewer industry and public works for well over 20 years. I think the last 3 to 4 years, I've seen more legislation come out than I think in my previous 20 years. It has been incredibly intense. I think we felt some of that here at the commission as well as at the council level. And I still think additional legislation and regulations are coming over the next 2 to 3 years. So I don't think we're done yet.
Anything further for the director? You want to get on to that?
I can
Yeah.
run the update on the GAC treatment at the water treatment facility. Scott, do you want to give an update on where you're at with that last vessel and when you think that'll be going online?
Yeah, we have one vessel that the contractor is struggling to get a safe sample on. So they started caustic soak on that this morning. They're hoping to have safe samples turned into the lab by Wednesday and Thursday this week, and then hopefully start up Friday afternoon.
So we're full of the carbon, just waiting for the
We are full
clean, ready to
Carbon,
go.
yeah. Yeah.
John has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. John Robinson.
So what does a safe sample mean? Are we exceeding the standard for PFAS?
No,
Or-
we have a tank that is struggling to get a safe back T on it.
Okay. So what are you looking for, treatment or
And they're gonna
flush?
do
flush?
a caustic soak on it. We can't use chlorine or anything of that sort because it would wreck the carbon. The carbon would absorb that, so the caustic is gonna raise the pH of the water and hopefully kill the bacteria.
Do you think that's a residual of the material that was brought in or the manufacturing and installation process?
I would suspect that it was probably the material that was brought in, or at least how it was pumped into the tanks. They're doing some investigation on that. I don't know that we'll find an actual cause, but the tanks were all safe tested prior to the carbon being put in. And then after the carbon was put in, one tank didn't get a safe back T after that.
Comment, question?
Go ahead, Mr. Forrest.
Scott, you're talking about startup on Friday. Can you tell us when you anticipate that we'll be not using the resin anymore for PFAS removal and we'll be relying solely on the carbon units? Will that be sometime next week, or is this going to take a month or a few days? Or what I'm concerned about is that resin and, how much longer we can use it without having to regenerate it again at considerable expense.
The resin will be running first in front of the carbon. So after Friday, if everything goes as planned and the safe samples come back good, we would have the carbon after the resin. So any PFAS following through the resin will get picked up by the carbon. So we should be online completely by Friday afternoon. Water to change out in the system usually takes about 3 days.
Okay, but I'm not a technical person, so the PFAS is going through the resin but not being absorbed by the resin. It's going onto the carbon and being picked up there, which is what should happen. What are we looking at in terms of regenerating that resin again? I mean, we were talking about maybe having to do that this fall if we didn't get the GAC system up and running, but it sounds like it is up and will be up and running in time, which is good news.
Correct. So in the packet here, there are some samples from our quarter 3 testing, which shows we are under the DHS recommended 20 parts per trillion for PFAS. So we have some shorter chain PFAS that are breaking through that ion exchange resin. The carbon will be online that will pick those up. And so the resin itself wasn't designed for PFAS removal.
Right.
So it will still work for removing TOC, its intended use, and we can regenerate that all the time. We won't have to replace it as part of this project. So the second replacement, we won't need to do once this carbon is online.
Gotcha, thank you.
Anything else, Scott?
Well,
Ben? Oh,
I think
Give it.
we just had a couple wastewater updates on our discharge quality effluent, and then the northwestern lift station is complete as well. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions on those projects.
looks good.
Okay.
All right, up next, presentation by Marathon County Health Department. Looks like Laura Scuderi is here to give us a little presentation on fluoridation from the health department's perspective in our drinking water.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for having me. My name is Laura Scuderi, and I serve as the health officer for Marathon County. I'm both a registered nurse and a resident of Wausau. And I'd like to start by just expressing my thanks to this group for the important work that the committee does. And we've had a chance at the health department to work with Eric and his team, and it's been a great collaborative partnership, and we've really enjoyed working with them. So thank you for all that you accomplish, and we appreciate the support of public health. Mayor Denny asked me to attend today's meeting and give a summary of the recent NTP monograph on the state of the science concerning fluoride exposure and neurodevelopment and cognition, a systemic review. That's the name of the report. It was released by the National Toxicology Program this past August, and I'll be happy to do that. And I'd like to give you some context on the subject matter before we do a deeper dive. So Michelle, if you could. Thank you. So what is fluoride? Just a quick overview. Fluoride is a naturally occurring mineral found in rocks, soil, food, and nearly all water sources. It strengthens developing teeth and can reverse and slow down tooth decay. Many communities add small amounts of fluoride to their water sources. Some communities need to adjust it down depending on the amount of fluoride in their water source. The benefits of community water fluoridation are extended to everyone in the community where they live, work, attend school, or play, and it does not require a change of behavior or access to dental care to receive the benefits. Fluoride can be helpful in two ways. Either you consume it and it bathes your teeth, or it's placed on your teeth. Toothpaste, mouthwashes do the placing, but the effect is gone once you rinse. Consuming fluoride through drinking water helps to produce stronger tooth surfaces and prevents cavities. A common question I have heard is whether we get enough fluoride from the food we eat or through toothpaste. You get fluoride from foods, some natural fluoride, but the amount of foods you would need to eat to get the benefits of fluoride in a day would not be feasible. We're talking pounds and pounds of extra bananas, for example. Fluoride from toothpaste and foods should be used in tandem with community water fluoridation for optimal results. The recommended optimal level for community water fluoridation is 0.7 milligrams per liter of water. The optimal level is so small that if this level were measured in time, it would represent 42 seconds out of 2 years, or for those of you who are visual like me, about 2 drops in a barrel of water. This recommendation is based on the latest scientific research and guidelines established by the United States Public Health Service. It is the lowest effective level of fluoride that will ensure optimal oral health benefits. Here's some local data that indicates the current dental health crisis in our area. This is the number of kids who were seen by the Bridging Brighter Smiles campaign who required more than just a simple cleaning. And that means that these kids required additional dental work because of decay. As you can see, the data is trending upward, which is in the wrong direction. This data is on our Marathon County Pulse website. Untreated tooth decay can cause pain and infection that can affect a person's ability to eat, speak, and sleep. For kids, the pain caused by tooth decay can result in missing time from school or performing poorly on tests. Research has linked oral health with how well children and teens perform in school. A 2011 study found that students with poor oral health were nearly 3 times more likely than their healthy peers to miss school due to dental pain. According to the 2013 Healthy Smiles, Healthy Growth Wisconsin Third Grade Children Report, 53% of Wisconsin's third graders have experienced tooth decay, with roughly 2,000 having pain or dental infections severe enough to require urgent care. It is a common misperception that fluoridation only benefits children, but it also benefits adults. By drinking fluoridated water at home, work, or school, people get the benefits. Every Wausau resident benefits from community water fluoridation regardless of age, income level, or insurance status. Here's a snapshot provided for the city of Wausau from the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, estimating a savings of over $1.2 million per year, equating to approximately saving $32 per person by preventing the need for dental care due to cavities. On this slide, you can see from the information provided, the dental crisis in our community disproportionately impacts those individuals living in poverty. Again, this is information from the Department of Health Services, which made this infographic specifically for the city of Wausau. I want to call your attention to the data that adolescents living in poverty are twice as likely to have untreated cavities in their permanent teeth than their peers. The cost for not fluoridating is high. Medicaid eligible costs for children in non-fluoridated areas were twice as high as those living in fluoridated communities. It also has impacts on our hospital systems due to emergency department visits, which are often the last resort for those who cannot afford dental treatment but have severe dental pain. Okay. So why I'm here today is to give an overview of the National Toxicology Program monograph on the state of the science concerning fluoride exposure in neurodevelopment and cognition, a systemic review, and yes, I did practice that. It's a mouthful. It has been in the news as late, and it was re-released by the National Toxicology Program under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I want to note that the authors of the study and peer reviewers, which were the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, consistently determined that the NTP report should not be used to draw conclusions about optimally fluoridated water and IQ. The report itself notes on the second page on the bottom in bold, this monograph and addendum do not address whether the sole exposure to fluoride added to drinking water in some countries, i.e. fluoridation at 0.7 milligrams per liter in the United States and Canada, is associated with a measurable effect on IQ. The report determined an association with high level fluoride levels, over 1.2 to 1.5 milligrams per liter, and IQ. As a nurse, I will tell you that dosage in this situation is important. Many things can become toxic if too much is given. A great example that we give in nursing school is you can actually give someone too much water. They can consume too much water and it can become toxic. So that is an example of that. Additionally, it also is important to remember that when reading the report that association does not equal causation. An association between IQ and exposure to high levels of fluoride means that both were found at the same time, but it doesn't mean that lower IQ levels were caused by exposure to fluoride. The way I normally explain causation and association is that if we were studying kids in the summer, we would find that during that season kids get more sunburns and they eat more ice cream cones. Ice cream cones do not cause sunburn, rather they are associated findings. In science, if we can say that two findings happen at the same time, but we can't prove statistically that one caused the other, we say that they are associated or correlated findings, and it is often the recommendation of these studies that more research is required. And that's my takeaway from this report. More research is required to determine what occurs at high levels, which is important and beneficial knowledge to have. And again, the NTP report study levels over 1.2 to 1.5 milligrams per liter, not the low level of 0.7 milligrams per liter that is the current level in the city water. According to the DHS and the American Dental Association, there are no current studies that provide scientifically convincing evidence of any negative effects of fluoride exposure over time at the recommended level for drinking water, which again is 0.7 milligrams per liter. It's worth noting that since the report's release, no changes have been made to fluoridation recommendations made by the EPA, CDC, U.S. Public Health Service, or the NIH. I do want to note that if the science would provide different evidence, new guidance will be issued. But I just want to make a quick note that guidance will not come from the Marathon County Health Department, but from the EPA, the CDC, the USDHS, and the NIH. I do want to speak briefly about the recent case that took place in California in federal court against the EPA regarding fluoridation. I spoke with the state's oral health prevention program, and they indicated that a judge had ruled that more study on fluoridation thresholds is necessary. The oral health team indicated that the judge's finding does not conclude that fluoridation is harmful to public health. Just a caveat, I am not an expert on legal proceedings. If more information on the federal case is desired, my recommendation would be to invite the Wisconsin Department of Health Services to go over the case in detail. I just want to reiterate that my background, I am a public health nurse. I'm not a dentist or a dental expert. So in preparation for today, I did a comprehensive literature review. I contacted dental experts to provide me with additional information. Listed on this slide are a number of good resources for information about fluoridation and its health impact on an individual or community. I highly recommend that members of this committee reach out to these agencies to get their thoughts on this. You can also reach out to area dentists, as they are experts on fluoridation and its impact. And then if you have clinical questions today, we have Dr. Hoffman here that can help us with any specific fluoridation questions about the clinical aspects. And then my slide got a little messed up, but here are my references, and I'm happy to email them to anyone if they want to take a closer look. I believe that some of these references were included in your packet. Was it last month? Last month? Okay. Thank you for your time today to review this information. I appreciate your ongoing efforts to provide safe water to the residents of Wausau.
Thank you. We'll open it up for questions, but just as a reminder and for the record, this is presentation, and there's, if as recommended, we'll potentially look further. So there's no decision going to be made today on the topic. Do we have any questions, Mr. Robinson?
So are you aware of any studies relative to bioaccumulation in tissue relative to fluoride intake if we've got it from multiple sources? Is that a concern, particularly as it relates to brain health or other tissue?
I'm glad you bring that up. I did talk with the Wisconsin Oral Health team, and what they said to me was that there are no studies that provide scientifically convincing evidence of any negative effects of fluoride exposure over time at the recommended level. So that was their answer to that question.
So again, let me rephrase that. So we've got, if fluoride is present in multiple sources, are we, so we're looking at it only from the issue of fluoride in the water supply, but are there any issues that look at the whole total issue of bioaccumulation relative to all sources?
When I spoke to I think the best person to answer this question would probably be Dr. Dunkel at the state oral health team. I did ask him something similar, a similar question, and he indicated that that there are options, or there's some teas that provide additional fluoridation that can put people beyond the recommended level, but we didn't get down to the nitty gritty of the the bioaccumulation aspects. So I would recommend contacting him at the state.
Mr. Forrest.
In some of the research I did before this meeting, it appears the city of, well, it doesn't appear, the city of Portland had a public referendum, I don't recall how many years or months ago, and fluoride is no longer being put into the city water system at Portland. I don't know how long ago that was, and I don't know if there are any studies that are going to document the effect one way or the other of that action. Are you aware of that at all?
I am not aware of individual communities that have or have not chosen to continue their fluoride, but I can say that the vast majority of the research that I reviewed indicated that there was a difference statistically between fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities.
Mr. Jean, anyone? So I have a question regarding dosage. You had mentioned dosage. How is it determined if someone, like an infant, is on formula drinking the water, probably more than maybe somebody who isn't consuming the water? I mean, how do we know dosage? Because dosage, wouldn't that depend on how much water one drinks?
Yeah, is it okay if
Sure,
Dr.
sure,
Hoffman comes in
sure.
and answers that question? It's a clinical question.
Are you asking the dosage of fluoride? versus, well, like for
Right.
an infant on formula?
Well, let's just take two people. I
Sure.
drink a lot of beer. I don't drink
Sure.
a lot of water, or,
Sure.
or whatever. You know, how do you determine that the?
I think-
maybe it's to John's point.
Are
the
you looking-
accumulation.
I think there's a couple issues because we're talking about adults versus infants. I believe the AAP Pediatrics had some guidelines about reducing the amount of tap water you use when making formula. I believe, I'm not positive, but I believe because there were some concerns, but I'm not positive about that. In terms of adults, when we're really thinking about dosage, what we're really thinking about from our perspective is that 0.7 milligrams in that's added to the drinking water than we are how many glasses of water to drink. When I was taught in dental school back in the early 2000s, if you were to overdose on fluoride, you'd have to drink like a bathtub full of water to overdose on the fluoride in the water. And it probably wouldn't be the fluoride that would get you, it would be the fact that you've diluted your electrolytes so much from drinking a bathtub full of water at once that's probably what would get you versus the actual fluoride. I don't know if that's the dosage part that you're coming from, or
Well, so if I drink 1 liter a day
Sure.
versus someone who's drinking 2, clearly they're getting twice the amount.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know.
I wouldn't have clinically, I wouldn't have a concern from that aspect.
Okay.
Now, I don't know that there's research out, but I'm sure that if I can look and see if I can find something for you.
So you mentioned, you referenced the
American Academy of Pediatrics.
Okay, so then for youth or for infants, are you suggesting we?
I believe there was.
publish-
I don't know the exact amount, the guide, but I believe there was guidance that came out to recommend that parents that are using formula to feed their infants to not use fluoridated water
Okay.
for concerns that they may be getting too much just from other sources as as well.
Okay.
I'm not positive, but I believe that was guidance a few years ago.
So should the city make note of that somewhere so people know that? I'm not sure if we ever do. We publish our, John is working on or Mr. Forrest is working on our report for the water.
I think these are things that really we would rely on the Department of Health and other medical agencies to provide us that information. You know, like right now, I mean, even with the court ruling and stuff out in California, we haven't heard it all from our regulatory authorities, the EPA or the DNR. So we'll reach out to them too, just to see, like, with the DNR statewide, but the EPA also nationwide. I've also been to a couple conferences over the last month or so, and there's been no talk about this at this point in time. Now, whether that's coming, I'm not quite sure, but I think if there are recommendations from DHS or otherwise, those are the people, or I could reach out to my contacts, because I used to work with the U.S. Public Health Service as well, to see if there's anything that we could maybe put out to the public with our newsletter and other information.
Yeah, I think if we're not hearing anything, maybe it's good to ask some questions and see what they say. Any further questions for Loris? Mr. Jean?
I don't have a question, but I'd have to refer to Scott. I know we have some natural fluoride that shows up in our water, so we're actually supplementing it. I don't remember the relationships.
Yeah, we're averaging 0.7 for finished water that we're putting out, but we're supplementing. Each well varies a little bit, but we go from 0.06 to 0.09, depending on which wells are coming in. But we just add to that to get to that 0.7.
Okay, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Laura.
All right, we'll turn the lights on here and get after number 4, discussion and update on drinking water PFAS levels for treated water and discharge water from backwashing. And we already talked a little bit about that. Scott?
So these are the reports that I was referring to earlier, Jim. So we have our Q3 PFAS testing results from our entry points, both 400 and 500. which show some shorter chain items breaking through around, I would say, close to 15 parts per trillion on each of those entry points. Those entry points are different combinations of wells. So we have 3 wells in one entry point and 3 wells on the other entry point. But then the outfall samples, which are non-detect for all, are required from the DNR for some of our discharge. So the flushing water that we had going through our carbon vessels, coming from the plant, going through the carbon vessels that we were discharging to an outfall, we were required to test for PFAS as part of that discharge. These are the values that we were discharging, mostly non-detects. I think we had one hit at 1.5 parts per trillion of the PFHSX, or XS, excuse me, at 1.5, which is below the limit of quantification. So that could be a variable there, but it did disappear on that next sample. So it's very promising, looking at the water going through our carbon, that there is no carbon PFAS detectable in it. So just a good comparison from our Q3 finished water sampling results to what we're expecting from running the carbon plant.
Mr. Jean?
When you say the word outfall, is it to the stream or is it to the sanitary sewer?
It's actually going to a retention pond outside of the facility.
Oh, so it will.
It will eventually get to the river.
Wisconsin River, okay, thank you.
Scott, will we get the same report from the GAC?
We will do some testing for PFAS when that system goes online, and we also have been requested from the DNR to do our Q4 sampling once that is online. So our Q4s will come when that is available.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from? Okay, up next, item 5, discussion and possible action approving the development of a pilot study to begin accepting leachate from the Marathon County landfill, and we talked about this last week, or last meeting. I think we've got some discussions between then and now. Eric?
Yeah, I'll start this off. Ben can fill in a little bit. We had another meeting with, since our last commission meeting with Marathon County landfill, with regards to kind of next steps and possibly putting a pilot together. So we do have another meeting, I believe it's this week or next, Ben? Tomorrow, thank you. With the DNR, or trying to figure out, like, we want to include the DNR in on those discussions and what we're going to do to see if they have any recommendations or things that they want to see as well. So we're moving forward with that. I think there's an update with all the minutes that we had from our last meeting, but do you have anything to add to that, Ben?
Just that we just discussed short-term, medium-term, and long-term discussions. And during the short term, it involved a pilot to see how the leachate would affect the treatment facility, the impacts of the different systems and that. In between the short term and medium term, we're gonna potentially have DNR discussions to find out if there's any potential exemptions available, at least make them aware of what our plan is from short to long term. Medium term is 100% acceptance of the leachate, and that varies with the DNR discussions that'll take place in the future. And then in the long term, the fact is what the landfill is looking at funding, clean water funding, as we are as well, as far as putting in a pretreatment of sorts, reverse osmosis, pre-treat the leachate at the landfill, and then the wastewater treatment plant would become a backup to their discharge during the downtime of their RO system, reverse osmosis, where we would accept that waste. DNR would be made aware of that, obviously. With us not receiving our draft permit yet, that discussion with the DNR needs to take place, see how it's going to impact the wastewater treatment plant first, with us moving forward with leachate acceptance.
Mr. Robinson?
So I guess my hope would be is that we'd look at this as a systematic or systemic issue, and we've got the issue of the leachate being generated by the landfill. We have the issue of your effluent discharge standards relative to the upcoming WPDS issue, and potentially on a long-term basis, we've got the issue of what do we do with biosolids if the regulations come. So I would hope that as we enter into these discussions and that we look at the long-term issues associated with it, and, you know, either the landfill or the wastewater treatment plant is generating any of the PFAS, but yet we're being asked to deal with it. And I think we just, when we go into the discussion, begin to look at both the short-term needs and the long-term issues. And I would hope that we would look again at leachate, effluent, and biosolids when we are having those discussions.
Definitely. And those discussions did take place as well, as far as the landfill accepting our biosolids as a cover source at the landfill. There'd be a pilot ran with that, as well as the spent resin filters from the water treatment facility and that. So those discussions did take place, and a lot of unknowns at this time. But
Mr. Robinson.
And again, I think Administrator Leonard at the last meeting talked about the Innovation Fund coming out through the Department of I believe, Revenue, that will provide assistance to programs that reduce cost, intergovernmental agreements. I would hope that you would keep an eye on that program and potential parameters if we can get some outside funding for studying and or addressing this issue. I think it would be helpful and be good for our ratepayers, whether they're paying you or paying the county. But please keep that fund and innovative program in mind.
we sure will.
Mr. Force.
Just to simplify it, what happens next, Ben?
Well, after our meeting tomorrow, we'll devise a plan moving forward. I believe we're gonna, and Dave's here from the landfill, Marathon County landfill. We'll discuss more on the DNR discussions in person versus probably a virtual meeting. In person would, I think, be best if we can get everybody on board or on, scheduled on the same date that works for everybody, that is. Just want to make them aware of our plan. I mean, it still leaves our effluent as a source of contamination into Wisconsin, and that's, I think, what needs to be taken into consider mostly. Yes, we can take the leachate, and they could take our biosolids, but it still leaves our effluent
Right,
possibly being compromised.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have, right? We want to do this because this has to get done, right? But we need the DNR to be on board with us and not for it to be punitive on either the landfill or the wastewater plant. And I think to start that discussions with them to make sure that it's not going to be punitive on either one of us as we approach this subject and find a solution for what we're doing. So.
All right, thank you, Ben. All right, up next is operating budget quarterly update through September 2024. Looks like Mary Ann's in the house.
Yeah, so I didn't prepare a presentation, but if we want to look at the sewer utility fund, if you recall, the budget was prepared on a modified accrual basis for 24 and 25, focusing on the impact of cash. You can see that under the operations column for sewer, through September, we've got 8.3 million of revenue and 7 million of expenses. So we've got about 1.2 million of profit going so far this year. Obviously, we are only a portion of the way through the year, and there are some non-cyclical expenses like interest payment. You can see that we did make our principal payment May 1, as well as the first interest payment, but we do have the balance of interest that will be due or we've recently paid last week, which was due November 1, and then the annual transfer. So that will have an impact on final results. Then when looking at the different capital projects, some of these we are waiting for closing with the DOA. For example, Eau Claire Boulevard, I think that's closing in the very near future.
December.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then some of these capital projects will actually be paid out of the utilities operations profit, like the transportation equipment. The treatment plant, we just received closing notice.
Yes.
Yesterday?
Yes.
Or last week?
Yes.
Yeah. So that loan will be closed. We did receive notification that once that's closed, we'll be having to contribute annually about $720,000 to our capital replacement fund. And we have to have that established by 2028.
Correct.
I guess other tidbits for the sewer utility is the council did approve a budget modification for the Headworks project, taking the $800,000, which will now be funded fully by the DOA, either grant money or borrowing, and funding the Cherry Street lift station.
With ARPA, yes.
With ARPA, yes. That's really, as far as the sewer utility, the main things. I mean, you can see that from a budget to actual standpoint, there are some that are overspending, some that are underspending. The salaries and wages is right now looking very close, and I think that is a matter of kind of a accounting change, because historically, we have accounted for water employees in the water fund, sewer employees in the sewer fund, and then when we were recording the meter all of the customer billing allocations to the sewer utility, it wasn't allocating the cost to personnel, it was just sort of a meter expense. And now with Workday, it's able to do that allocation on an automated basis on a monthly, so it comes out of the personnel in water and goes into the personnel in sewer, which is an acceptable form as far as the PSC is concerned. So I think that's why you're seeing a higher personnel cost budget to actual than maybe we budgeted. We've made that change in the 2025 budget, so you won't see a similar budget variance. To Jim Force's question, I guess I didn't recall that we had outstanding items, but we can, at the next meeting, I can include the 2025 budget on this report so that you'll be able to see, and I think that will give you all the information you were hoping for. Next year's budget, this year's budget, and actuals to date. So I'll add that to the next month's report. And then from the water utilities perspective, again, right now we're showing about 8.7 million in revenues and 690 in expenses, showing about 2,690,000 going down to the bottom line. Similar situation where we have to make our final interest payment and our payment in lieu of tax, so that will have an impact on that final number. But I do think that we will see that we're generating a profit at the end of the year, which is great. Again, some of the other differences between the revenues coming in on these capital projects and expenses really are related to mostly timing and draws, though we do have a few projects like the solar project that never had a revenue source, so it basically is something that has to be paid for out of operations. And then water meters, we have not done any of the transfers yet from the general fund. There was $1 million approved from the general fund, and then 800 from ARPA. And then miscellaneous equipment would be funded from operations as well. So I think, from a financial standpoint, we should finish up the year in pretty good shape.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Robinson?
So thank you for generating the reports, but I guess because they're relatively new for us to look at.
Sure.
You've got your operational side of things, and we've got our capital
Yep.
side. Where is the funding for the capital side coming from? Because it's not reflected in the operational projected revenues.
So it shows up on top. So it's.
Capital
it-
contributions?
Yep, it would either be proceeds from borrowing, grants, or capital contributions, which would be basically either ARPA funding or a TID financing, or it could be projects that are special assessed.
But if I just look at the sewer utility, for
Yep.
instance, I'm showing capital contributions of 36,000.
Yes, that
But
would
yet
be
I'm seeing
special
capital
assessments.
outlay of 1.8 million.
Yes. So as I mentioned, some of these projects, we are waiting for closing from the DOA in December. So like the Eau Claire Boulevard right now is showing just under $400,000 of expenses. We will have funding from the DOA for that when we close that. And I can't remember if that was all loan or if some of it was principal forgiveness.
About 150,000 was principal
Okay.
forgiveness, yeah.
Transportation equipment, that would be funded 100% from operations. The Greenwood and Northwestern, is that a DOA loan? I don't remember.
No.
If that, so this is
No.
going to be funded from operations
Yes.
as well? Yep.
Yes.
And then the treatment plant, that loan, we just received closing notice. So, we do have a few expenses here, and we have one draw left that I think is settling November 13th with the DOA, but then
Yeah.
the activity for that project will be complete. So it's like $20,000 maybe, give or take,
Right.
more.
So is it more helpful for the commission not to have the capital expenditures in there and only see the
Yeah, or I could put it on two separate
Right.
sheets of paper.
Yes.
Yes.
It's, I think the thing is oftentimes, we've got, for example, professional services. If you look in the water utility, they're paying for quite a few professional services, but they're related to capital projects. I was just trying to
Yeah,
separate it out, because you would, so I can try a different presentation for next month. We'll have the 25 budget, and if you want to make changes further, we can do that too. I did kind of go online to see if I could find some presentation from other communities. It's really hard to find water utilities who are actually giving financials in an open forum to their committees, but we'll definitely give it a try.
okay.
Mr. Robinson.
So I think that would be appreciated
Sure.
and helpful, but, later Ben is asking for authorization to buy a pickup truck out of this year's budget, and it's very difficult for me to understand where we are relative to the capital side of things.
Sure.
And so I have no basis to
Right.
make a
And
decision
I-
as to whether or not we actually have the money or not. And I guess I would ask you while you're up here to comment on whether we have that $85,000.
So we didn't talk about that. And, there was I think, some reasonable cash reserves for this sewer utility because we were able to do our
It's water,
rate
actually.
change. Oh, this is water?
Yeah.
I thought he said Ben.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
is it- okay,
it's water.
Scott?
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought it was, then
So
it's Scott's.
we did talk about it, didn't we? And I
Yeah.
said I thought that it was okay because if you look, the water utilities cash position is not very strong because, again, we did not have the opportunity, but they are showing, some pretty strong revenues as it compares to expenses, and for the dollar amount, the materiality, given all of the other funding sources that we've been able to find for their other capital projects, I felt that it was okay to do that. And I think that's the other thing, through this whole Workday implementation. 2023 was the first year, 2024 was the second, but it was the first year to budget under the Workday
Right.
environment. And so, next year, 25, we've got the capital in sort of in Workday, and so it will be easier for us to do budget to actual and see what those financial results are.
Mr. Robinson, sure.
A follow-up. So I continue to struggle as a commissioner finding out what our role is relative to the budget, because we review the capital side of things. We'll review rate increases, but we don't necessarily always review and approve the operating budget. I think at some point, there's the disconnect. You know, the council approves the operating budget. We recommend the capital side. So I'm lost relative to where our role is, where we are relative to funding source responsibility. And we seem to have control, but we don't.
Yeah. And maybe, I mean, I know that conversation came up at the last meeting when we presented the operating budget to you. And I know that state statutes kind of detail what the Water Commission's role is. I know that our city attorney went through and established what the roles were, because our ordinances also establish roles. So, you know, like maybe for the next meeting, that could be flushed out a little bit better so that people do know what their roles are.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, like in the past with the budgets, I mean, your point is well taken, John, as far as the capital has always come here, you know, but the operating never really has, right? And my feeling is it should be, right? And I'm hoping that Workday will help us with that, to present that to you and help you become more familiar with the operation side as well as the capital side. And so I see some benefits to what Workday is able to do and how it presents information. So I'm hoping that evolves in becoming more or better from a presentation standpoint. So but I'm happy to bring that information back with the city attorney to the next meeting too, just to, for the roles, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. Just seems intuitive that we would have, as a commission, have the full picture here, whether we are authorized to approve or not. Certainly, our input is important.
For sure. Yep.
Further questions for our finance director? All right, thank you, Mary Ann.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Up next, item 7, discussion and possible action approving the now famous replacement of an existing truck.
Scott's truck that Ben is paying for?
Yeah, well, I would appreciate that. No, I guess the memo pretty much says it all. We have some funding that we weren't expecting. Earlier this year, we actually had a vehicle ordered and had to back out on the order because we didn't feel it was appropriate at that time to go through with the purchase, not knowing where we're going to be. Since then, we've come across some different funding, so we have some cash available. We'd like to make a purchase.
And this is replacement of what, Scott?
We can go through the list. We
Yeah.
currently have 3 right now
Yeah.
that could use replacement. We have a 2008 truck that's pretty rough shape. We have a 2016 van that's in really rough shape. That was an inexpensive vehicle that we tried testing a cheaper model on. And we also have a 2011 smaller truck that needs replacement. So the hope was that we could make a purchase. By the time we get our purchase in, we anticipate that one of these will need more repairs than what it's worth, and then we would retire it at that time.
So this isn't adding to the fleet at all, it's a replacement.
I move to approve.
Motion from Force, second from Jean. Further discussion on that, and this should help us out on meter replacements.
That's what we're hoping, yeah.
All right. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of replacing an existing truck as outlined, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. On to number 8, discussion and possible action approving a research project with the Water Research Foundation for regeneration or disposal of PFAS-laden drinking water residuals, media, and waste.
We were approached by the Water Research Foundation to enter this study with them. to start taking a look, as you know, we had some of our backwash residuals and stuff that we have that were recently tested. So they'd be looking at testing and doing some research both on the backwash from the resin as well as the backwash from the GAC. And so this is no cash outlay from us. The water utility would take the samples, but we wouldn't have to pay for them, and there's not a lot of sampling there. But I think, you know, we step into these things because I think this is an advantage not only to us to knowing, but also to future for other communities, right? And we step into these things trying to be proactive and hope they don't end up being punitive on the utility, right? With the regulatory agencies, which the same thing with the leachate, with the landfill. But I think we need to continue to look forward and be proactive on these things so we have a good understanding of what we're doing, and just stay in communication with our regulatory authorities at the same time on what we're doing. And as I think overall as a benefit in getting information. If we don't do it, somebody else will. And so I think this is a way for us to be very proactive. I would like to see us.
Yeah.
Mr. Robinson.
I would move that we authorize participation in the research project with the Water Research Foundation for regeneration or disposal of PFAS-laden drinking water residuals, media, and waste.
All right, we have a motion from Robinson on the research project.
Question?
Looking for a second first, and we have a second from Gene.
Okay.
Question
Sorry.
from Mr. Forrest. Go ahead.
Thank you. Proposals received by 3 PM Mountain Time, November 21st. That's not us to submit, is it? We don't have to submit a proposal.
No, these were the proposals
Okay.
that they were soliciting, yeah.
All right.
Yep. And I'm not exactly sure when this was going to start, but then he was saying we're probably like 6 months out or so on that. And we expect a letter of involvement coming, which would basically you're authorizing the mayor to sign that. Yeah, yeah.
Alder Watson.
So it won't take a lot of extra time or away from your other
No,
duties or anything? Like, you're just gonna take samples, that'll probably be the extent, and
Right.
did they report back to us? Like, could they come and present their findings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, like lots of times down in Chicago, Water Research Foundation, they present their R&D on what they're doing at different workshops and stuff, and we've attended some of those, and they've been very informative. So to be a part of that, I think, would be beneficial. Yeah.
Motion?
Okay,
Second.
Mr. Gene.
Is the research foundation under the AWWA or the EPA, or is this standalone?
This is a standalone foundation. They do like a lot of research and as I said, research and development. Like they've done a lot of studies as far as destruction of PFAS. They've done a lot of research as far as biosolids and soils and things like that. So, yeah.
All right, with a motion and a second, anything else on that? All in favor of
Aye.
approving the research project, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. The next meeting is scheduled for December 3rd at 11 o'clock right here, and I believe that is a Tuesday.
I have one question, Mayor, before
Yes,
we
sir.
adjourn. I received, and I assume others did, a communication from Supervisor Morash regarding confined space instruction. Did we address that? And I only ask because, in my opinion, as a commissioner, when we get a question from the public, I think we owe that person a response. So I didn't know whether we had responded on that issue or not.
We have not yet, but it was received as a public comment. We will put it into the minutes, and I think it would be appropriate then to address it as a inquiry.
Yes.
But I mean, I think we got that this morning or yesterday, so we have not
Okay.
addressed it that I'm aware of
But we
yet.
plan to. Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, I can just tell you, that all of our staff are trained in confined space. I know there was some other information on there as far as chemicals and corrosion and stuff, and I'll be happy to respond to that and how we address that. So, yeah.
Okay, any hanging fires here? All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. From Watson, second by Jean, all in favor.
Aye.
Opposed? See ya, it is now, 22 minutes after 12.